The San Francisco committee proposes $5 million in reparation payments. McCarthy and Biden discussed raising the debt limit. And did a Pfizer exec admit to performing gain-of-function research? That and more on this week's headlines. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. It's been a stressful couple of years, so let's start on a nice light topic. Israel and Palestine. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank. Blinken called for peace amid a surge in violence in the region. He said, "We are urging all sides now to take urgent steps to restore calm, to de-escalate. We want to make sure that there's an environment in which we can, I hope at some point, create conditions where we can start to restore a sense of security for Israelis and Palestinians alike," which of course is sorely lacking. Israel and Palestine aren't getting along? Wow, it's still kind of early, but Blinken might just have put himself in firm contention for the Understatement of the Decade award. Blinken also said the U.S. supports a two-state solution, and that the U.S. opposes Israeli expansion and annexation in the region. Notable is that this has been the U.S. policy for years, and Blinken didn't actually offer any concrete ideas for how to actually achieve this goal. I don't know why he traveled all the way to Israel if he was just going to tell people what they ought to do without coming up with real solutions. He could have just done that on Twitter. Speaking of Twitter, 3 former Twitter executives will testify next week before the House Oversight Committee over the platform blocking a New York Post story on Hunter Biden's laptop shortly before the 2020 presidential election. I covered the Hunter Biden laptop story and how tech companies and the media screwed it up a lot. Twitter has been accused of suppressing this story for political reasons and for becoming an unofficial enforcer for the government and the FBI to get around the First Amendment and suppress information. These accusations came from items released in the Twitter files, another story I covered a lot. The FBI has denied using Twitter to suppress information. Well, that's all I needed to hear, because if there's anyone who's trustworthy and incorruptible, it's the FBI. If there was a government attempt at suppressing information, people need to be held accountable. 1, for violating the First Amendment, and 2, for not doing a better job at suppressing the information. So poor Matt didn't have to watch those Hunter Biden videos so many times.
Chris, don't make me watch them again. Don't make me watch.
Twitter won't be the only social media giant scrutinized by Congress. TikTok CEO Shou Chu will testify before the U.S. Energy and Commerce Committee in March. It's over national security and privacy concerns. TikTok's ties to the Chinese Communist Party could put users' data at risk. The committee will also bring up concerns over TikTok's effect on children. At this point, TikTok is like Jared Leto. Everyone kind of liked them at first, but the more you learn, the creepier they got. And now whenever you see them, you think, how are they still a thing? Don't people know how dangerous they are to minors? More after the break. Welcome back. San Francisco's African American Reparations Advisory Committee proposed giving longtime black residents of the city who meet certain criteria $5 million each in reparations. They also proposed reparations in the form of housing, education, and debt forgiveness. However, San Francisco City supervisors said it would destroy the city's budget. And the chairman of the San Francisco Republican Party said a city with a $14 billion budget, more or less, proposing to spend $50 billion. So just financially, it doesn't make sense. To be fair, though, not making financial sense is kind of San Francisco's whole thing. To any black San Francisco residents, I wouldn't get your hopes up for this. After all, San Francisco is the city that spent years of planning just to come up with a $1.7 million toilet. If any reparations are given at all, it'll probably wind up being a $49 gift card to Panera Bread in 2047. Speaking of people with a destroyed budget, the U.S. federal government. The U.S. is quickly reaching its debt limit. President Biden and Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy met to discuss lifting the debt ceiling so the government doesn't default on what it owes. The government has never defaulted on its debt. And since 1960, the government has revised the debt ceiling to avoid default 78 times. You might wonder, if the government can just raise the limit, then what's the problem? Well, the economy is like a balloon filled with napalm. It's volatile, complex, should be handled with care, and if there's too much inflation, it'll burst and a lot of people are going to get burned. So what did Biden and McCarthy talk about and have a hard time agreeing on? Essentially, McCarthy and several Republicans want less spending. Biden and several Democrats want to be able to continue funding the $2.2 trillion Build Back Better Act. And the average American just wants to be able to buy eggs without having to pay for them in monthly installments. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, said, "We're not going to default, but Republicans are going to fight for spending cuts." And I think the American taxpayer should be thankful that somebody in this town realizes that you couldn't continue to spend $1 trillion a year more than you bring in. Yeah, that wouldn't make financial sense. To be fair, though, not making financial sense is kind of Washington, D.C.'s whole thing as well. Despite promises to make cuts, Republicans vowed that Social Security and Medicare were off the table. And considering how the U.S. spends way more than it takes in, I assume that table is made of solid gold with diamond legs. The White House found Republicans' vow to not touch Social Security or Medicare strange. According to a White House spokesman, for years, congressional Republicans have advocated for slashing earned benefits using Washington code words like strengthen, when their policies would privatize Medicare and Social Security, raise the retirement age, or cut benefits. So Republicans now want to save Social Security and Medicare despite spending years seemingly trying to destroy it. This would be like if Gargamel suddenly wanted to create a Smurf preservation sanctuary. Is this a trap? Donald Trump warned Republicans not to make cuts to Social Security or Medicare. He said, "Cut waste, fraud, and abuse everywhere that we can find it, and there's plenty of it. But do not cut the benefits our seniors worked for and paid for their entire lives. Save Social Security, don't destroy it." So what's the solution to fighting debt and inflation? Well, an actual idea being thrown around is minting a $1 trillion coin. Can't blame Republicans for that, though. The $1 trillion coin idea is supported by people who believe in modern monetary theory, which says that governments can spend as much as they want and deficits don't matter, which is only slightly less believable than the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow monetary theory. But many experts have called the $1 trillion coin a horrible idea. Hey, what do you know? Antony Blinken suddenly has some competition in the Understatement of the Decade award. And after the break, a New York grand jury hears evidence over Trump's hush money scandal. Welcome back. A district attorney presented evidence to a grand jury to decide if criminal charges should be filed against former President Donald Trump. Oh, I just realized I probably need to narrow that down. There are multiple cases against Trump right now where criminal charges are being considered. This case involves allegedly breaking campaign finance law to pay hush money over an affair with adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 presidential election. You know, a lot of Trump supporters think all these cases against him are a Democrat-led conspiracy to discredit the former president. But considering just how many cases there are, I'm starting to think the people really behind all this are Trump's lawyers. Great job, everyone. We can finally afford to buy eggs again. The Biden administration announced it would end the COVID-19 emergency declarations on May 11th. This means Americans will have to start paying for COVID testing and treatment themselves. We did it, everyone. The pandemic is officially going to be over, only 8 months after Biden said the pandemic was over, which was months, if not years, after a bunch of other people said it was over. COVID-19 had more false endings than the third Lord of the Rings movie. Call me when COVID gets on the boat to the Undying Lands. Speaking of COVID, undercover videos released by Project Veritas claim to show Pfizer's Director of Research and Development for Strategic Operations and mRNA Scientific Planning, who they name as Jordan Tristan Walker, saying Pfizer was exploring mutating the COVID-19 virus to preemptively develop new vaccines.
One of the things we're exploring is why don't we just mutate it ourselves so we can preemptively develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that, though, there's a risk of as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses.
Pfizer put out a statement disputing these claims, saying, in the ongoing development of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, Pfizer has not conducted gain-of-function or directed evolution research. In a limited number of cases, when a full virus does not contain any known gain-of-function mutations, such a virus may be engineered to enable the assessment of antiviral activity in cells. Wait, did they just say we don't engineer viruses, except sometimes when we engineer viruses, but for good reasons? The reason being just to make sure our drugs work. That's like a kid saying, I don't break windows. Now, can you give me a crowbar? It's for charity. So is it true? Is Pfizer recklessly mutating the COVID virus? Well, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, the Project Veritas videos were heavily edited. They were also a gotcha-style sting operation, as the person in the video thought they were on a date. Once he realized he was being secretly filmed, he said he had been lying. And there isn't any definitive proof that the person in the video is who Project Veritas is claiming him to be. Ultimately, the video comes off in parts feeling less like an expose and more like a reality show you'd see on TLC.
Please unlock the door.
Give us our stuff.
Please unlock the door.
We didn't add that music, by the way. Tell me that doesn't look like something you'd see following MILF Manor. Now, the person in the videos might actually be who Project Veritas says he is. There's a very real chance that Walker could have scrubbed all his social media and online footprint to avoid harassment/consequences. And as I discussed earlier, the media and tech companies aren't above suppressing information. But take our word for it, isn't exactly the gold standard of journalism. At least it didn't used to be. Ugh. On the other hand, taking Pfizer at their word is also dubious, since when it comes to being trustworthy and transparent, pharmaceutical companies make the FBI look like Mr. Rogers hopped up on sodium pentothal. Virus research does involve some potentially scary things that the public might not understand. And there's been so many cover-ups and so much hiding information that it's no wonder people don't trust pharma companies with things like this. It's important to note that in the video, Walker never claims that Pfizer is currently mutating the COVID virus. He says that there have been internal discussions about it, but also that Pfizer realizes people won't like them doing something like that, which could be a deterrent.
Okay, so Pfizer ultimately is thinking about mutating COVID?
Well, that is not what we say to the public. No. That's why it was a thought that came up at a meeting, and we were like, why do we not? It was like, we're going to consider that. There'll be more discussions.
Okay.
That exact reaction, right? We're like, wait a minute, people won't like that.
So Pfizer might be telling the truth when they say they haven't done any of this research yet. And while what Walker said about mutating viruses to preemptively develop vaccines or treatments sounds horrifying to most people, that's the kind of thing that virologists already say they do. The whole purpose of the type of gain-of-function experiments that were being funded by the EcoHealth Alliance, which funded the Wuhan lab, is to find viruses that could infect humans and then mutate them to preemptively develop better vaccines. Here's Peter Daszak from the EcoHealth Alliance talking about this back in 2019.
Well, so I think that coronaviruses are pretty good. I mean, you're a virologist, you know all this stuff, but you can manipulate them in the lab pretty easily. It's just spike protein drives a lot of what happens with the coronavirus, zoonotic risk. So you can get the sequence, you can build the protein, and we work with Ralph Barrick at UNC to do this. Insert it into a backbone of another virus, and do some work in the lab. So you can get more predictive when you find a sequence. You've got this diversity. Now, the logical progression for vaccines is if you're going to develop a vaccine for SARS, people are going to use pandemic SARS as
sure.
But let's try and insert some of these other related and get a better vaccine.
So if you're horrified by this idea, the problem isn't with Pfizer. The problem is with the entire field of virology. Many scientists think it's okay to do this, even with the risks of developing new viruses that could infect humans. And that also explains why so many virologists were against the idea that COVID could have come from a lab leak. Because then that would mean the kind of research they've been telling us for years is safe is actually dangerous, and they shouldn't keep getting money to do it. So the end result of the story is basically just everything is terrible. But there is one positive thing. At least this video we made Matt watch had nothing to do with Hunter Biden.
God bless us, everyone.
So what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Leave your comments below. And if you want to help us deliver nonpartisan news, be sure to support America Uncovered by going to patreon.com/America Uncovered. All it takes is as little as $1 or more per episode to fight YouTube's censorship and demonetization. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.